Alright, greetings and salutations. My name is Comicfire, and welcome back to my dramatic reading of the Chronicles Stormchaser. In the last episode, we left off at Chapter 11, and so, that is where we shall begin. Chapter 11, The Eye of the Storm. Twig lay some way from Mugbutt's filthy straw-covered quarters. He was still pretending to be unconscious. Each time the Stormchaser pitched and tossed, he would roll over a little further, hoping that the flathead would assume it was the movement of the boat shifting him across the floor. Slowly, painfully slowly, he was maneuvering himself towards the staircase. One chance at escape. That was all he would get. "Stupid, stupid, stupid," he told himself. Not only had he disobeyed his father, but he'd left him at the mercy of the treacherous mutineers, just as Cloud Wolf had feared might happen. The sky ship lurched sharply to the left and Twig rolled over twice. The stairs were getting closer. "It was so obvious that Spleethe was up to no good," Twig continued angrily to himself. "He never liked you. You should have realized why he was being so friendly." "Oh, sky above," he murmured. "What have I done?" The sky ship listed to starboard, and Twig had to brace himself against the floor to stop himself from being propelled back to Mugbutt's berth. Through the crack in his eyelids, he watched the flathead snuffling through the soiled straw for any bits of meat he might have missed. Disgusting creature, he thought, and trembled. And a formidable fighter. At that moment, the Stormchaser reared up like a prowl-grinned charger, tilted abruptly to port, and dropped in the sky. With his heart in his mouth, Twig rolled the last few yards towards the bottom of the stairs. There, he hesitated and looked back. The sky ship reared up a second time, and there was a loud crash as Mugbutt lost his balance and tumbled to the floor. "Now!" Twig said to himself. "Get out while you can!" He leapt to his feet, gripped the wooden rails fiercely, and climbed the steep set of stairs as quickly as his trembling legs would allow. "Oi!" Mugbutt bellowed when he realized what was happening. "Where are you going?" Twig didn't wait to reply. "Come on," he urged himself desperately. He was halfway up the stairs, yet the hatch at the top looked no nearer. "Come on!" Already Mugbutt had climbed to his feet, vaulted over the bars which enclosed his berth, and was racing headlong towards him. 6 more steps he had to go, and Mugbutt was there at the bottom. 5, 4... Twig could feel the entire staircase tremble as the heavy flathead hurried up behind him. 3, 2... "Nearly there," Twig muttered. "One more step and—" All at once he felt the horny hand of the flathead goblin grasping at his ankle. "No!" He screamed and kicked back with both legs. Shoving the hinged hatch open with shaking hands, Twig launched himself up and pulled himself through the narrow opening. He knelt down beside the hole. Mugbutt's spatula fingers appeared at the rim. Twig leaned forwards, seized the hatch door, and slammed it down with all his strength. There was an agonizing cry. The fingers disappeared from view, and from below the hatch came the muffled sound of Mugbutt tumbling back down the staircase. Twig had done it! He'd escaped! Yet already he could hear the flathead pounding back up the stairs. With his heart thumping, Twig slid the heavy bolts across the hatchway, and, to make doubly sure, heaved a huge barrel of pickled tripweed across the floor until it came to rest on the hatch door. Then, leaping to his feet, he headed for the next flight of stairs, the flight which would take him up onto the deck itself. As he began climbing, the sound of furious hammering and cursing exploded behind him. "Let the hatch hold," Twig prayed. "Please!" Up on deck and completely unaware of the drama that had been unfolding below them, the captain and crew of the Stormchaser were struggling to keep the sky ship airborne, as the mighty ball of cloud crackled and flashed across the sky. "Double bind the tally ropes!" Cloud Wolf bellowed as the great storm hurtled on towards the twilight woods. It was essential that he maintain the Stormchaser's position at its very center. "Draw in the stud sail! Untangle those jib lines!" The atmosphere was, in every sense, electric. Tiny filaments of hissing blue light fuzzed the outline of the sky ship. They fizzed, they sparked, they danced on every surface, from bowsprit to rudder wheel, masthead to hull. They danced on the sails, the ropes, the decks, and they danced on the sky pirates themselves, on their beards, their clothes, their fingers and toes, setting their entire bodies tingling. Tem Barkwater was turning a handspike. "Can't say as I like this overmuch," he grumbled as the sparking blue light played all around his hands. Stope Boltjaw looked up from the skysail he was busy repairing. "It's, playing, with my, jaw," he gasped. Tem grinned. "It's not, nay," he complained. "But it is!" Tem Barkwater chuckled as his shipmate's lower jaw continued to open and close with a will of its own. Years earlier, Stope Boltjaw had lost his lower jaw during a fierce battle between a sky pirate ship and 2 league ships. A notoriously ruthless leaguesman by the name of Ulbus Pentafraxus had crept up on him with his hunting axe, and struck him a savage blow which had caught him sideways on, just below his ear. When he'd recovered, Stope had fashioned a replacement from a piece of ironwood. So long as he remembered to keep the bolts well oiled, the false jaw had served him well enough. At least, it had done up until now. From the moment the Stormchaser penetrated the great storm, the curious electrical force had caused it to gape wide and slam shut, time and time again. And there was nothing Stope Boltjaw could do to stop it. "How much longer is this going on?" he groaned. "Till we get to the Twilight Woods, I reckon," said Tem Barkwater. "Which will be in approximately 9 minutes, Spiker called down from the rigging. 9 minutes, Slyvo Spleethe repeated gleefully under his breath. The quartermaster, who had been sent to check that the mooring cleats were holding up, but was now leaning against the poop deck handrail, gazing idly into the hypnotic swirl of clouds all around them, glanced round. "Keep it up, Quintinius Virginix," he sneered. "Complete your journey to the Twilight Woods. Recover the Stormfrax. Then I shall make my move, and woe betide anyone who—" He gasped. "What in Sky's name?" The sight of Twig standing in the doorway of the little cabin above the staircase filled Spleethe with an uncontrolled rage. If Cloud Wolf should also see him, then all would be lost. Without a moment's thought, Spleethe dashed off towards him. Twig looked about him in a state of bewildered excitement. His narrow escape from the Flathead Goblin had left him breathless and edgy. Now, as he took in his surroundings, his heart clamored more urgently than ever. The air was purple. It smelled of sulfur, of burnt milk. All around the skyship, the enveloping clouds boiled and writhed and crackled with blinding lightning. His body tingled as tentacles of blue light wrapped themselves around him, causing every hair to stand on end. This was storm chasing! The crew were feverishly busy with Hubble, the ferocious albino banderbear, tethered to the helm, and Cloud Wolf fully occupied with the sail and weight levers as he struggled to maintain both speed and lift. What a time to have to reveal that he'd stowed away on board. What a moment to have to break the news of impending mutiny. "Yet I have no choice," Twig muttered grimly. Already he could hear the wooden hatchway splintering below him. It was only a matter of time before Mugbutt emerged on board. Twig knew that if he didn't speak up now, then his father would surely end up dead. He shuddered miserably. "And it'll all be my fault." Bracing himself for the short yet perilous journey from stairhead to helm, Twig was about to set off when a heavy hand slammed down on his shoulders and yanked him back. An ice-cold blade pressed hard at the base of his neck. "One move, one sound, Master Twig, and I'll slit your throat," Spleethe hissed. "Understood?" "Yes," Twig whispered. The next instant he heard a click behind him and found himself being shoved roughly into a store cupboard filled with buckets and mops, lengths of rope and spare sailcloth. He tumbled backwards and landed heavily in the corner. The door slammed shut. 5 minutes and counting, the Oak Elf's strident voice announced. Twig climbed shakily to his feet and pressed his ear against the locked door. He could just make out 2 voices speaking in conspiratorial whispers above the continuing roar and rattle. One was Spleethe's, The other was Mugbutt's. "I'm not to blame," the Flathead was whining. "He escaped before I had a chance to stop him." "You should have kept him tied up," came Spleethe's irritated reply. "Curse that Twig," he said. "Someone's bound to find him before the Stormfrax has been retrieved." "I could finish him off now," Mugbutt suggested coldly. "No," said Spleethe. "We need him alive, not dead." He growled with mounting rage. "The meddlesome little whippersnapper has forced my hand, and that's a fact. But all is not lost, Mugbutt. Come on, let's see if we can't turn the situation to our advantage after all." As the pair of them departed, Twig felt his heart hammering harder than ever. There he was inside a great storm, hurtling on towards the twilight woods in search of Stormfrax. Finally, he was doing what for so long he had only dreamed about. And yet because of him, the dream had become a waking nightmare. Above him, Spleethe and Mugbutt had made it to the helm. He could hear Spleethe's voice, though not what he said. Twig swallowed nervously and hammered on the door. "Let me out!" he cried. "Tem! Spiker! Boltjaw! Oh, why won't you hear me? Let me!" At that moment, Cloud shouted out. "What?" he bellowed. "But this is mutiny!" Twig shuddered and hung his head. "Oh, Father," he whimpered, "if we ever get out of this alive, will you ever forgive me?" Confronted by the captain's rage, Spleethe remained icily calm. Apart from his eyes, which glinted beadily behind the steel rims of his glasses, his face betrayed not a hint of emotion. "Not mutiny," he said as he drew his sword from its sheath. "Merely a redistribution of power." Hubble growled ominously. "This is leaguesmen's chatter," Cloud Wolf snorted. "Has it really come so far, Spleethe?" Just then, the Stormchaser lurched to the left and abruptly lost speed. The rear of the storm raced up to meet them. Cloud Wolf lowered the stern weight and raised both the fore and aft sails. The skyship leapt forwards again. He turned back to Spleethe. "Do you seriously imagine for a moment that you could sail the Stormchaser? Huh?" Spleethe hesitated for a moment. "You are a fool, Spleethe," Cloud Wolf continued. "What use have the leagues for Stormfrax? Tell me that! It is frax dust they need, and no one knows the secret on how to make it safely." "On the contrary," Spleethe replied, "the League of Free Merchants is prepared to pay highly for a cargo of Stormfrax, very highly indeed, and since you are so reluctant to deliver it to them, then I shall. I think you'll find the others behind me when they realize how much is at stake." Mugbutt made a move forwards. Hubble's ears fluttered. Cloud's wolf hand gripped the hilt of his sword. "Sky above!" the captain exclaimed. "Did you not hear me? The leagues have no use for Stormfrax. They simply wish to prevent it from reaching the treasury of Sanctifrax. For if that happened, the floating city would again become stable, and their lucrative alliance with the Rain Tasters would fall apart." Slyvo Spleethe tightened his grip on his flashing sword. "They have tricked you, Spleethe. They want you to fail." "You're lying!" Spleethe screamed and turned to Mugbutt. "He's lying!" Cloud Wolf seized the opportunity. He drew his sword and threw himself at Slyvo Spleethe. "You mutinous bilge-cur!" he roared. But Mugbutt was too quick for him. As the captain lunged forward, he raised his spear, as massive and heavy as befitted the powerful flathead goblin, and leapt between them. The chiming sound of metal on metal filled the air as the captain and Flathead launched themselves into a deadly battle. Clash, crash, clang! The fight continued, fast and furious. Cloud Wolf howled with rage. "Blood and thunder!" he roared. "I'll have the pair of you sky-fired!" He parried away the increasingly frenzied attacks from Mugbutt. "I'll split your gizzards! I'll rip out your treacherous hearts!" "Whoa!" the Banderbear shouted out and tore at the ropes that bound him to the helm. The Stormchaser dipped and rolled. If it drifted towards the outer reaches where the storm was raging at its wildest, the sky ship would be turned to matchwood in an instant. "No, Hubble," Cloud Wolf called out urgently. I'm all right. You must hold a steady course." The raised voices, the clash of metal, the pounding of feet. Twig could scarcely believe what he was hearing. Was his father fighting on his own? Where were the rest of the crew, and why didn't they come to their captain's aid? "Tem Barkwater!" he bellowed and beat his fist desperately against the locked door. "Stope Boltjaw!" All at once the door burst open. Twig tumbled forwards and was immediately grasped by Slyvo Spleethe. "I told you to keep your mouth shut," he hissed as he wrenched Twig's arm up behind his back with one hand and pressed the knife to his neck with the other. What's happening?" Twig said. "You'll find out soon enough," Spleethe spat as he frog-marched Twig across the sparking deck. "Do exactly what I say," he instructed, "and you won't get hurt." Quaking with terror, Twig was bundled round the skirting deck and up the narrow flight of stairs which led to the helm. The scene which greeted him filled him with sickening dread. Cloud Wolf and Mugbutt were locked in mortal combat. Eyes blazing, jaws set, the pair of them were fighting for their lives. Their weapons clashed together with such ferocity that spark after dazzling yellow spark jumped out of the fizzing blue. Twig wanted to leap forwards and fight by his father's side. He wanted to slay the wicked mutineer who dared to raise his hand against Captain Cloud Wolf. "Easy now, Master Twig," Spleethe hissed in his ear, and increased the pressure on the dagger at his neck. "If you value your life." Twig swallowed anxiously. The fight continued. He couldn't look, he couldn't turn away. Now Mugbutt seemed to be winning. Now Cloud Wolf had the upper hand. And all the while the surrounding storm gathered strength. The lightning flashed again and again, illuminating the curdled clouds and glinting on the flashing blades. There was no grace to the fight, no finesse. Mugbutt, as the stronger of the two, was content to hack and slash away, battering the captain into submission. Twig tensed nervously as he watched Cloud Wolf being driven back towards the far wall. Spleethe, fearing the youth was going to cry out, clamped his hand over Twig's mouth. "Patience," he whispered. "It will soon be over, and then I shall take my rightful place as captain of the Stormchaser." "Captain Spleethe," he mused. "It has a nice ring to it." "Oh, father," Twig thought desperately as Cloud Wolf battled gallantly on. "What have I done to you?" "Tem!" he heard him crying out above the rumble of the thunder and clashing of heavy blades. "Stopejaw! Spiker!" But none of the pirates heard him. They were too busy keeping the increasingly unstable skyship airborne. "The sails are working their way loose," Tem bellowed as he heaved round on the sail wrench. "Stope, realign the spinnaker bridges while I try to secure the mainsail. Spiker, see to that tolly rope." "And the flight brackets are jammed," Spiker shouted back as the skyship continued to toss and turn. "Stope, can you help me?" "I've only got one pair of hands," Stope grumbled. "And if I don't untangle this nether fetters, soon we'll all be goners." At that moment, a particularly violent gust of wind struck the port bow. Stope Boltjaw cried out as the skyship listed, and the matted mass of rope and sail was snatched from his hand. At the other end of the skyship, Cloud Wolf lost his balance and staggered across the deck. "Whoa!" cried the Banderbear. If the other crew members could not come to his captain's aid, then surely he should do something. "No, Hubble!" Cloud Wolf said breathlessly as the skyship lurched back to starboard. "Keep hold of the helm, or we will all perish. That's an order." Tears welled up in Twig's eyes. Even now, as his father's arms grew weak, Cloud Wolf was more concerned with his crew than he was with himself. How valiant he was, how knightly. He, Twig, did not deserve such a father. Clash, crash, hack and slash! Mugbutt's spear slammed down time and again, and with such force and speed that Cloud Wolf could do nothing but defend himself. All at once the sky lit up with a sudden flash of blinding light, and the Stormchaser gave another awful lurch, and the whole skyship pitched forwards. "The mast is cracking!" Spiker screamed. "Secure the main fedder!" Tem roared. "Lower the sails!" Cloud Wolf, with his face to the stern, stumbled back. Mugbutt was quick to seize the advantage. He leapt forwards and swung savagely with his spear. Cloud Wolf ducked. The heavy blade missed him by a fraction. Mugbutt roared with fury and lunged again. Twig gasped, then sighed with relief as Cloud Wolf knocked the Flathead's weapon away in just the nick of time and countered with a sudden attack. His sword thrust forward at Mugbutt's chest. Yes, yes, Twig thought, urging the sword on. But it was not to be, for at that moment a terrible sound of splintering wood ripped through the air as the mast snapped off, a third of the way up, and came tumbling down. It crashed onto the deck and tipped over the side, where it remained, suspended in midair below the port side. The skyship listed sharply to the left and threatened to roll right over. "Cut the ropes!" Tem yelled, as he began slicing through the main fedder. "Now!" Stope and Spiker leaped to his side and began slashing and slicing at the tangled ropes and rigging. With half the ropes cut, the rest abruptly broke as one under the heavy weight, and the mast dropped down through the sky. The Stormchaser rolled back to starboard. Twig let out a muffled cry as he and Spleethe toppled backwards, and he felt the knife nick the soft skin at his throat. His father was faring even worse. Not only had the sudden jolt thrown Mugbutt out of reach of the thrusting sword, but now Cloud Wolf was staggering towards him, off balance, sword flailing and utterly defenseless. Twig froze as the Flathead grabbed his spear again and raised it up. Another second and his father would impale himself on the great jagged blade. "Whoa!" Hubble roared as he too saw what was about to happen. He tore furiously at the ropes which bound him to the wheel. Mugbutt, startled by the noise, glanced up and realized, to his horror, how close the tethered Banderbear had ended up standing. One of his mighty arms was raised. Hubble roared again and swung out savagely. Mugbutt leaped desperately to his left, fast but not fast enough. The blow caught the Flathead on the arm. It sent the spear spinning across the deck, and Mugbutt himself hurtling to the floor. Cloud Wolf was on him like a shot. Without a moment's hesitation, he brought his sword down, hard and sharp, severing the goblin's head with a single blow. Then, bloody sword raised, he turned murderously on Spleethe. "And now you," he stormed. "You!" He fell silent. His eyes widened, his jaw dropped. "Twig," he muttered. Slyvo Spleethe sniggered as he pulled the blade oh so gently across Twig's throat. "Drop your weapon," he said, "or your son gets it." "No," Twig cried. "Don't do this for me! You must not!" Cloud Wolf tossed his sword aside and let his arms drop defenselessly. "Release the boy," he said. "You have no quarrel with him." "Maybe I will, maybe I won't," Spleethe teased. He put away his dagger but drew his own sword in a flash. "Maybe I'll—" The sky cracked and flashed, and the Stormchaser pitched wildly, first to one side, then the other. The skyship was drifting perilously close to the edge of the storm, and there was nothing Hubble could do to stop it. Then all at once, before anyone realized what he was doing, Spleethe let go of Twig. He shoved him to the floor and raced headlong at the captain, sword raised. He screamed. The skyship shuddered violently. Every beam, every plank, every joint creaked in protest. 2 minutes and counting, Twig heard Spiker calling, and then, with sudden alarm, "Tem! Boltshaw! The captain's in trouble!" At long last the others had noticed something was wrong, but too late. Far too late. Already Spleethe's sword was slicing down through the air towards Cloud Wolf's exposed neck. Below the hull, one of the porthole weights was being shaken loose. Abruptly it broke free and tumbled down through the sky. The Stormchaser keeled to starboard. The sword landed heavily, missing its target but burying itself deep in the top of Cloudwolf's arm. His sword arm. Slyvo Spleethe's lip curled. "You were lucky that time," he said. "You will not be so lucky again." He raised his sword a second time. "I am captain now!" "Hubble!" Twig cried out desperately. "Do something!" "Whoa!" the Banderbear bellowed and gripped the wheel. The captain had told him, ordered him to stay put. For a moment their eyes met. "Wha?" said Twig. "Whoa!" Hubble roared. Mind made up, his eyes blazed and his hair bristled as he ripped the ropes from their moorings and tore them to pieces as if they were made of paper. "Whoa!" A shaggy white mountain, he stormed towards Spleethe in a flurry of flashing claws and bared teeth. He seized the scurrilous quartermaster round the waist, raised him up in the air, and slammed him furiously back down onto the deck. Then, before Spleethe could so much as move a muscle, the Banderbear roared again and came crashing down on the quartermaster's back. There was a thud. There was a crack. Slyvo Spleethe was dead, his spine broken in two. Twig climbed shakily to his feet, and desperately clung hold of the balustrade as the storm-tossed skyship pitched and rolled, totally out of control. The mutinous usurpers might have been dealt with, and his father's life spared, but the situation was grim. With no one now at the helm, the wheel was spinning, while the sails that remained flapped uselessly overhead. Below the hull, two more of the balance weights shook themselves loose. The Stormchaser tossed and twisted, bucked and dived. Round and round it spun, threatening at any moment to tip upside down and scatter the hapless crew to certain death below. Cloudwolf struggled to pull himself up with his one good arm, wincing with pain as he did so. Tem Barkwater, who, with the others, had finally made it to the bridge, struggled to get to him. "Leave me!" Cloudwolf cried fiercely. A blinding flash tore across the sky, lighting up the Stormchaser and revealing the true extent of its damage. Any second now, it would break up completely. Cloudwolf spun round to face his crew. "Abandon ship!" he bellowed. The crew stared back at him incredulously. What madness was this? Abandon ship? When they were on the verge of reaching their destination? At that moment, the air all around them exploded with the clamor of countless small birds as they billowed up from the bowels of the ship. Their triangular wings and whiplash tails, all frantically beating, flashed black against the dazzling background. Thousands of them they were, yet they flew with single intent. When one turned, they all turned. Squawking, squeaking, screeching, the flock wheeled this way and that, as if to the command of some unseen choreographer. "Ratbirds," Tem murmured with horror. He knew, as did every sky pirate, that ratbirds only abandon a sky ship that is truly doomed. He spun round. "You heard the captain," he bellowed. "Abandon ship!" "And alert both the stone pilot and the professor," Cloudwolf called out. "Aye, aye, Captain," said Tem Barkwater and staggered off to do the captain's bidding. Spiker was the first to go. As he threw himself from the balustrade, he called back, "We are crossing into the Twilight Woods! Now!" The rest of the crew soon followed him. Despite the awful danger of remaining on the Stormchaser a moment too long, one by one they knelt down and kissed the deck, before climbing reluctantly up onto the side and leaping off into the purple air. Stope Boltjaw, the stone pilot, Tem Barkwater, and the Professor of Light. As the blast of air struck them, so the spring mechanisms of their parawings leapt up, the wind pockets inflated with air, and they glided off and away. Back on the bridge, Cloudwolf was making his way to the helm, step by agonizing step, as the sky ship continued to judder and jolt. "You too, Hubble!" he shouted at the steadfast Banderbear. "Leave your post! Go!" The great beast surveyed him dolefully. The sails fluttered and tore. "Now!" roared Cloud Wolf. "Before the sky ship goes down!" "Whoa, whoa!" he cried and lurched off to obey. As he moved away, Cloud Wolf saw that the Banderbear had been shielding a second member of the crew who had not yet left the skyship. "Twig!" he barked. "I told you to go!" The swirling clouds squirmed. The Stormchaser shuddered and creaked. "But I can't! I won't leave you!" Twig cried out. "Oh, forgive me, Father! This is all my fault!" "Your fault," Cloud Wolf grunted as he struggled to take control of the helm. "It is I who is to blame, leaving you at the mercy of that scoundrel Spleethe." "But—" "Enough!" roared Cloud Wolf. "Leave now!" "Come with me," Twig pleaded. Cloud Wolf said nothing. There was no need. Twig knew that his father would sooner lose his own life than his ship. "Then I'll stay with you," he said defiantly. "Twig, Twig," Cloud Wolf cried, his voice barely audible above the rush and rumble of the storm. "I may lose my ship. I may yet lose my life. And if that is my fate, so be it. But if I lost you, it would—" He paused. "Twig, my son, I love you, but you must leave. For you and for me. You understand, don't you?" Tears welling in his eyes, Twig nodded. "Good boy," said Cloud Wolf. Then, lurching awkwardly from one side to the other, he hurriedly unbuckled his sword belt, wrapped it round the scabbard, and thrust out his hand. "Take my sword," he said. Twig reached forwards. His fingers grazed his father's sword. "We will see each other again, won't we?" he sniffed. "You can depend on it," said Cloud Wolf. "When I regain control of the Stormchaser, I shall be back for you all. Now go," he said, and abruptly returned his attention to the rows of weight and sail leathers. Sadly, Twig turned to leave. When he reached the outer balustrade, Twig looked round and stole a final look at his father. "Fair fortune!" he cried to the blasting wind and launched himself in the air. The next instant he screamed out in terror. He was dropping like a stone. The para-wings must have been damaged when Spleethe had thrown him into the store cupboard. Now they were jammed. They would not open. "Father!" he screamed. "Father!"